Hey there, Griff Hamlin here from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Welcome and thanks for joining me today. In this video, I want to talk to you about our good old, A minor pentatonic scale or A minor blues scale, but possibly looking at it in a little bit of a different way. As I do with a lot of these videos, oftentimes I want to try to open your eyes to as many different ways of looking at these same 5 notes as possible, because eventually one of them is going to work for you, and it's going to be the one that you really latch onto, and everything's going to kind of open up, hopefully. So this might be a little bit of a different approach to looking at all of the notes, and in particular we're going to look at a note which is the flatted third of the scale, and we're going to talk about how to manipulate that one note to kind of weave in and out between the major and the minor blues sounds and what that entails. So if we look at our regular old A minor box 1, right? We have A, C, D, D sharp or E flat, E, G, A, again C, D, E flat, E, G, A, C. Okay, and we probably, most of us know that. If you don't, you should probably go watch one of my other videos where I go over that. What you may not always think about is what I call the function of each note. Now, some people I know will say this is the intervals. I don't call them intervals, because to me an interval is a distance between 2 notes. I guess you could say we're talking about the interval between the root and the note that we're on. And yes, that would be correct. But I call this the degree of the scale, or the function of each note within the scale. So to me, the way I look at this is that this note here, this very first note, is the root of the scale. Okay, now the root has obviously a unique function within the scale. It's home base. It is the note that we have deemed most important. That's the important thing. It's all up here. Okay, it's all how we deem that note as most important, therefore we call it the root or the tonic. There's a lot of different names that you could use, okay? But keep in mind that we call it that. It's not, it doesn't have this intrinsically. This note here, the C, is the flatted third, okay? You don't necessarily have to know why it's called a flatted third, but it's called a flatted third. It has a very specific function, which is to determine whether or not this scale is major or minor. Okay, that's its function. If it's a flat third, as it is in this case, the scale is minor. If we bring it up a half step, it becomes what we call a major third, or a natural third. And then the scale would be major. What's important to note is that even though, like, let's take a major scale, a diatonic scale that has 7 notes in it, the third is the only one that is allowed to determine whether or not that scale is major or minor. That's it. That's the only one that gets to pick. So it's a very, very important function, right? Keep that in mind. Okay, we're going to keep going. So that's the function of that note. The next note we have in our blues scale is the 4. Okay, now the 4 is sometimes called a subdominant. It doesn't have particularly a purpose in the way that we use it. Okay, there's no special purpose that we're going to talk about, but it's a note that it needs to be there. The flatted 5 is commonly called the blue note. Okay, so guess what its purpose is? It's to give us that bluesy sound, right? The 5, the 5th, has a purpose. It's called the dominant. It tends to lead back harmonically. It leads us back to 1. So that's kind of its purpose. But what you'll also find is that it gets you around. It's part of the chord as well. Okay? The root and the 5th are also part of the chord. The flatted 7th, okay? Now, this is the next note in the scale, and its purpose is to establish what I call the dominant nature. Okay, so the dominant nature, what do I mean by the dominant nature? This is a harmonic thing, and I'm sorry that I'm going to get super in the weeds on the theory here. It's just for a moment, and then I'm going to get back to some application, so you can skip past this if you want. But the dominant nature of blues is really interesting. You have 3 types of chords fundamentally: major chords, minor chords, and dominant chords. Okay, That's really all there is. Dominant or altered. And those families get big, but major, minor, dominant. That's basically it. Major chords that have like a major 7, right? We get that major 7. Okay, if you put a sort of minor-esque, because remember the pentatonic is a minor, the pentatonic minor, right? The third is flatted, so it's minor. If you put a minor-esque sound over that major 7, you're probably not going to like the result. It would be very, very odd, right? The major 7th, along with the major 3rd, which is what the major family is very, very major. That establishes major in a huge way. The 3rd and the 7th are both major. In the minor world, both the 3rd and the 7th are minor. So it's a very minor established sound. The dominant sound has a major 3rd, which indicates a major chord, but it has a flatted 7th, which indicates a minor chord. So we sort of have this half and half. And it's the reason that we use both the major sound, we use the minor sound and the major sound. Right? We can use both of those sounds over a dominant chord. Okay? Well, what gives us that is that flatted 7th. That's its purpose. Now, obviously, it's in conjunction with the minor 3rd, but nonetheless, that's how I define that note's purpose. So we have the root, right? I think the purpose is self-evident. Flatted 3rd makes it minor. 4th is kind of to get us where we need to go. The flat 5 is the blue note. The 5 is the dominant. It resolves nicely back to the 1. The flat 7th gives us this dominant nature, this moving back and forth between the major and minor sounds, and it still sounds okay, right? So then we're back to the root, and we repeat: flatted 3rd, 4th, flatted 5th, 5th, flatted 7th, root, flatted 3rd. Okay, so every single note has a place and has a purpose. Okay, now we could probably do hours worth of exploration and talking about the different things you could do to every single note, but the one I want to talk about is the 3rd. So root, flat 3rd, right? There's 1, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, root, flat 3rd. This is the one that we're going to talk about a lot, and this one, flat 3rd. Okay, what are some things that I can do to this note? Because this note is such a huge factor in the scale. And by the way, if we were doing box 3, for example, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, root, flat 3rd, 4, flat 5, 5, right? The notes are the same. So don't think that I'm just doing it in box 1 because that's what most people are comfortable looking at, but don't think you can't do this in other places as well. So if we take that 3rd and we move it up a half step, like I said, it becomes major. Okay, so again, if we want to take advantage of sort of that dominant nature of the chord, we can do something like that, right? If I've got my my little jam track rolling, and I do something like, right? You probably heard I did that. Okay, well that works really well over the 1 chord. Okay, so that's one thing that we can do with that 3rd, is we can move it up a half step. And you could bend into that. I mean, you've probably seen that type of idea, 100 times or more. So that's what we're doing. We're just taking that 3rd and just manipulating it. I'm not thinking about some new scale or some new pattern or anything of the sort. All I'm doing is taking advantage of, I'll call it one of the most important notes in the scale. To me, the 3rd and the root and the flat 7th are the most important notes, period. So if we go to, let's say, this upper third, right? We went a half step up. What happens if we go a half step down? We get what's called the 2. You know, in relation to the A, it's a major second, so we'd call it the 2, which comes from the major scale. So if we take that flatted third and we go down a half step, we get the 2, which gives us a nice sound as well. If we, again, so again, I've added kind of a cool little sound. And again, I've done it just by manipulating the third, okay? So what I would suggest that you do, look at your boxes, and I would do this one at a time, okay? But inevitably, go through your boxes and realize that, okay, box 1 starts on the root, right? And we went through that. Box 2 starts on the flatted third, 4th, flatted 5th, 5th, flat 7th, root, flat 3rd, 4th, flat 5th, 5th, flat 7th, root, flat 3rd, 4th, flat 5th, 5th if you want to get up there. Right, if you're in box 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5. Right, if you're in box 4, 5, flat 7, root, flat 3rd, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, root, flat 3rd, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7. Finally, in box 5, flat 7, root, 3rd, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, root, flat 3rd, 4th, flat 5th, 5th, flat 7th, root. Okay, so pick one at a time. Don't try to learn all of those, okay? But maybe, you know, as part of your warm-up, as you sort of play through those scales to kind of, you know, maybe warm your fingers up, try saying those functions to yourself to try to get them to start to cement themselves. Because a lot of times, you know, when we play a different key, right? If we go from A to, say, D, the notes change, but our hand shape doesn't change. And so it can be really useful for us to say, all right, well, I'm used to, you know, manipulating my third in this way. That fingering isn't going to change. All those scale degrees are still going to be the same. All of those note functions are still going to be the same. So that can be really helpful to know the scale pattern and to sort of be able to look out and find those thirds. Those thirds are very vital, right? If you kind of bend the major, that's kind of, you know, that's how we do over the 1 chord when we want to get that major sound. You don't have to switch scales to the major blues sound. You certainly can, and it sounds great when you do, but you don't have to. You could just sort of massage that third up a half step. You want to add in the second, you can take that third and drop it a half step. So that gives you 2 new sounds that you can add in without like learning, or, you know, you're not mentally switching gears to a whole new scale. You're just kind of working a little bit with what you already have, okay? So maybe this gives you a little bit of a different way to view things. It's a way that I use a lot. I'm always acutely aware of the scale degree that I'm on, that, you know, what I'm working with right now. Because like I say, each one of these notes serves a purpose. They each have a function in the musical world. And so you want to take advantage of those every chance you get. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you got something out of it, feel free to share it with some guitar playing friends. Again, I'm Griff Hamlin from bluesguitarunleashed.com, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.